The polar bear's story. On a vast floating ice floe, a lone polar bear begins a new day. The world of the polar bear is an endless white of ice and snow. The pure white coat of the polar bear is the perfect camouflage in this landscape. Beneath that fur is black skin that helps the polar bear absorb heat. A thick layer of blubber keeps the polar bear's body warm against the cutting cold. It takes a deep breath, feeling the icy air of the polar bear's home. Its large paws help the polar bear walk easily on the snow. The silence of the Arctic is broken only by the footsteps of the polar bear. It is the apex predator, an uncrowned king of the polar bear's world. An extraordinary sense of smell allows the polar bear to detect prey from miles away. The main task of the day for the polar bear is to hunt seals. The sea ice is the most important hunting ground for a polar bear. It patiently walks along the edge of the ice, searching for seals' breathing holes. Patience is one of the most effective weapons of a polar bear. It can lie in wait for hours without moving, a skill of the polar bear species. Finally, the polar bear has found a promising sign. It presses its body flat against the ice surface. The massive body of the polar bear becomes low profile. It slowly creeps forward, without making the slightest sound. When the moment is right, the polar bear lunges with explosive power. The hunt was successful, securing energy for the polar bear for many days. After its meal, the polar bear will carefully clean its coat. It rolls in the snow, a unique dry bath of the polar bear species. The life of a polar bear is a constant struggle against the harshness. It is also an excellent swimmer. A polar bear can swim for miles on end. The front paws of the polar bear act as powerful paddles. But the world of the polar bear is changing rapidly. The warming climate is melting the icy kingdom of the polar bear species. Each year, the sea ice retreats earlier, shortening the polar bear's hunting season. This polar bear feels the change in its own home. The ice floes become thinner and more unstable under the weight of the polar bear. It has to swim longer distances to find ice and food. Every long swim is a drain on the polar bear's precious energy. Finding food is becoming more and more difficult for every polar bear. The polar bear stands on a drifting ice floe, gazing pensively at the ocean. It remembers its childhood, back when it was a polar bear cub. Back then, it was born in a warm snow den with its mother. The mother polar bear had taught it all the skills to survive. It remembers the days of playing with its mother, a happy memory for the polar bear. Its mother had taught the polar bear how to hunt and how to swim in the cold water. That was a time when the ice seemed eternal to a polar bear cub. But now, the future of the entire polar bear species is threatened. Their existence is tied to the existence of the sea ice. The polar bear continues its solitary journey. It is a symbol of strength, but the polar bear is also very fragile. It travels across ice-free lands, a strange sight for the polar bear species. Sometimes the polar bear must go inland to find alternative food. But the land is not the ideal hunting ground for a polar bear. The life of the polar bear is being pushed to its limits. Even so, the resilient spirit of a polar bear never dies. It still fights every day to be able to survive. The polar bear looks up at the sky where the aurora is dancing. The beauty of the Arctic is a part of the soul of every polar bear. It finds another ice floe large enough to rest on. The polar bear curls up, trying to stay warm in the snowy wind. It dreams of a world where the ice once again stretches to the horizon, a dream of a safe future for the generations of polar bears to come. The fate of the polar bear species lies in the hands of climate change. The story of this polar bear is a warning for the entire planet. The disappearance of the polar bear will be an irreplaceable loss. It is not just an animal. The polar bear is a vital part of nature. It is the guardian of the frozen lands, the polar bear. As night falls, the entire landscape sinks into silence. Only the lonely silhouette of the polar bear on the ice floe remains. It is a silent warrior, a polar bear facing its greatest challenge. It still has hope, because hope is the last thing a polar bear has. Despite all difficulties, the polar bear is still the lord of this place. It is the eternal symbol of the wild Arctic. The legacy of the polar bear species is a story of strength and adaptation. And in the silence of the long night, the polar bear resiliently waits. It waits for a new dawn, a new chance for the polar bear species. The struggle of the polar bear is a tragic epic of modern times.